Anderson Cooper confronts one of the most influential pastors about a couple of very key and polarizing topics. By one of the most influential pastors, I mean Bart Barber, who is the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest evangelical denomination in America. Now, the Southern Baptist Convention has been enthralled in quite a bit of controversy, including covering up SA from leaders in the church. That was discussed, as well as a plethora of other topics, including everything from politics to January 6th to the LGBTQIA's position in the church. So on this video, I'll be reacting to Bart Barber's 60-minute interview with Anderson Cooper and the way he responded to some of these questions, where they align with scripture, and how you at home can also prepare yourself to answer some of the most polarizing questions as a Christian.
Ruslan.
If you didn't know, the Southern Baptist Convention is a network of churches that has over 14 million members in over 45,000 churches. Bart Barber is the newly elected president on the heels of a massive controversy that recently came out. We covered it on the channel. We're going to recap it on this video. In this specific interview, Anderson Cooper asks him a ton of questions. Some questions I thought were relevant, some weren't. And of course, he asked him the question. You know, the question they always have to ask Christians. So we're going to be looking at this video. Let's jump right in. We're going to start it. This is from 60 Minutes. And again, I didn't even know Anderson Cooper was the host of 60 Minutes, but this is from the latest episode of 60 Minutes. Let's check this out.
Bart Barber lives with his wife and 2 children in Farmersville, Texas.
What we're hoping to do is to use kind of regenerative farming method.
He's got some land with a dozen or so cows.
If you want to see people come to know Christ, the way to do it.
I was joking with Zach. I said Bart lives Zach's dream life on a farm with cows and acres of land and all that good stuff.
That is to share the gospel and pray.
And has preached every Sunday for 23 years at the First Baptist Church, which only has about 320 members.
Little shade by Anderson Cooper, only 320 members. That's a fairly big-sized church, if you ask me.
What made you decide to try to become the head of the SBC?
I believe that the Southern Baptist Convention faces some unique challenges right now. I felt like God was calling me to try
to say the least.
give leadership at this moment to help Southern Baptists move forward.
The chair declares the winner to be Bart Barber, the next president of the Southern Baptist.
Now, he ran by a won by a pretty big margin. I didn't know there was only 5,000 voting members. I thought this would have been much bigger. One of the pastor that married us actually was at this event. So they only had about, it looks like about a little over 5,000 votes for this specific vote, and he won 60% of them. So that's interesting.
Baptist Convention.
When Bart Barber was elected SBC president in June, it was just 4 weeks after an independent investigation revealed some former members of the SBC's executive committee, which oversees budget and organizational issues, had for decades ignored hundreds of credible accusations of sexual abuse in Southern Baptist churches and seminaries, partly to avoid being held financially liable.
This was a complete bombshell. Over 700 different clergy, pastors, leaders on a list with documented allegations of SA, and they knew about it and they suppressed it. Okay, this is a complete L from the Southern Baptist Convention. We covered it on this channel, and I think this is a part of the overall cleansing that's happening in the industrial complex that this happened. This is some gnarly systemic issues that were happening within this coalition of churches.
They actually kept a list of over 700 names of people who had been credibly accused. What they said, though, is we couldn't give that to the churches because local churches have autonomy and who they hire and fire for pastors. We can't.
Cap! They could have done something and they didn't.
And tell them they can't hire this person.
Ryan Burge is an assistant professor at Eastern Illinois University and an American Baptist pastor. He's one of the country's leading data analysts on religion and politics.
Were they calling law enforcement and letting police know that there was a predator at this church in this state?
The executive committee had the list, put it in a drawer, and didn't tell anyone about it for over 10 years.
That's an L, man. That's really very frustrating. Now, I like Bart Barber. I like the energy he has. I like what he says in the rest of this interview. And remember, Anderson Cooper is going to ask him the question, and his answer is brilliant.
That's the mindset that we're repudiating and moving against.
When you read that report and to read accounts of people who were brave enough to call in to the executive committee to report abuse, for them to be ignored.
That's not a strong enough word. We didn't just ignore them. Sometimes we impugn their motives. Sometimes we attack them. The reason why I'm president of the Southern Baptist Convention is because our churches do not agree with that.
Come on.
And have taken action to correct those things.
Now, when he says our churches, some of you guys don't know, but a lot of famous churches, famous pastors are a part of this coalition. Rick Warren's Saddleback Church was a part of the Southern Baptist Convention. I think initially, I believe Stephen Furtick's Elevation Church is still possibly a part of the Southern Baptist Convention. This is a massive denomination of churches, right? And I don't know who is and isn't still within the network, but this is a huge, huge, huge movement of churches. And this is a complete L that this happened, that it was suppressed, and that it was all types of allegations, escalating all the way to a young lady confronting a pastor on the stage and going on the stage and talking about how there was SA when she was a child. This is wild, wild stuff that goes way beyond allegations. There's documented abuse by multiple folks, and they did nothing. Not only they did nothing, but they shamed a lot of these victims as well.
Barber says he's cooperating with the Justice Department's investigation and appointed a new 9-member task force that's building a registry for credible reports of abuse to help churches track predators.
I have strong feelings about this. It's not just anger, although I'm angry about it. God called me to be a pastor when I was 11. I believe in this.
It's crazy that the Justice Department was involved in this. Like, that's wild to think about, that this was that big of a deal. And, you know, seemingly he's stepping in and making the right changes.
For people to sully this hurts me. I'm not doing this to try to accomplish some PR objective for us. I'm doing this because I want to serve God well.
For the new president of the SBC, that means staying true to his deep conservative values and his beliefs about the last presidential election.
Do you believe the 2020 election was stolen?
No.
You believe Joe Biden is the legitimate president of the United States?
I do, absolutely. I pray for him consistently as the president of the United States. I believe he was legitimately elected.
Bart Barber told us that he doesn't believe the election was rigged. He does believe that Joe Biden was duly elected the president of the United States.
That's a big deal. 60% of white evangelicals believe the election was stolen in 2020, and many, many Southern Baptists go to church every Sunday believing that. Southern Baptist pastors have been afraid to speak about that from the pulpit because they know lots of people oppose that in the pews.
How many people, how many votes?
I think that's a very interesting question. Now, here's what I want to say about this, okay? This number being thrown around, and I can link you guys to a video that Dr. Sean McDowell did when they reacted to Jesus and John Wayne, but this idea that 80% of white evangelicals voted for Trump. The issue with this statement is that there was a massive amount of evangelicals that didn't vote at all. Okay, that very few actually did vote in the general election. There was about 50% that did not vote. Okay, so when you talk about 70%, 80%, that's of the ones who voted, right? So when he says 60% of evangelicals believe that the election was stolen, I would just say, how are you coming to those numbers? Because we've seen these numbers manipulated with regards to this number of like 80% of evangelicals voted for Donald Trump. It's like, wait, slow your roll. But when you dig away at the numbers, you find out that it's actually not 80% because 80% didn't vote. Only about 50% voted, and out of the 50% that voted, 80% that voted. And when you do the basic numbers, it's not the majority of evangelicals that voted because so many didn't vote. I know I just threw a bunch of numbers at you. So it's interesting that it goes to this line of questioning out the gate. If you're enjoying this so far, make sure you smash that like button. It really does help us out a ton. Now,
at least 70 million people identify as evangelical today. He can have a huge impact when it comes to who they vote for and why they vote for that candidate.
Ryan Bird says in 2016, evangelicals accounted for 33% of all votes cast for Donald Trump. But Bart Barber's
33% of all votes. So they're being honest with the numbers now. Evangelicals count for 33% of all votes that were cast for Donald Trump.
vote was not among them.
In 2016, you said, "I think it hurts the credibility of my testimony for me to be a vocal supporter of a demonstrably evil man whose campaign platform consists mainly of his evilness."
Yeah, I did not vote for president.
It's pretty redundant on his part of evil man, his campaign of his evilness.
2016. And that lays out my rationale for that pretty well.
What was the evilness that you saw?
The way he treated women that had been documented at that point. I thought that a lot of the rhetoric about immigration was wrongful. A lot of Southern Baptists thought that the rhetoric about immigration was wrongful.
Talking about legal immigration.
Talking about legal immigration.
You embrace it.
I embrace it. I'm thankful for people who have immigrated. I live in Texas. I'm surrounded by people who are intermarried into our families. They make our community better.
Correct me if I'm wrong. In 2020, you did vote for Donald Trump.
Part of what changed is that
So the immigration bit is important because not only was it about legal immigration, Trump came out against DACA and was trying to get DACA overturned. Now, if you don't know DACA, DACA is a bill that was passed for folks who were born in another country and came over illegally, but they've been here the majority of their life, right? So I have friends that are DACA recipients, and it's not a direct pathway to citizenship or legal residency, but it's also kind of like, hey, we're going to allow them to stay here and not try to deport them. There's a lot of folks that have been impacted by DACA, and the fact that Trump, as a quote-unquote conservative, tried to overturn DACA definitely created some tension with a lot of Christians. And it was one of the reasons why I was like, bro, as a fellow immigrant, and I came here legally, but that is very problematic to try and get people out of this country that have been here since they were little children by trying to overturn DACA.
The president advocated for some legislation on sentencing reform, something that really addressed some injustice that affected minority communities. I was encouraged by the consistent pro-life support that the president gave. I didn't expect that.
Talk about deletion of children and how Trump was pro-life and anti-deletion of babies. And then he asks him the question. You know the question. You know it's coming. You guys all know what the question is, right? Just so we're on the same page. But before we get to the question, I gotta make sure that you know about our October 20th Bless God podcast launch. I wanna make sure you guys see a short preview of this because not many people have seen it, and I don't want you to miss out for this event that we've partnered with Moment. Check this out, this little sneak peek of what's coming October 20th.
I've always thought it was nasty to not put in 2 weeks. I quit that day.
I didn't even wasn't even in the mood to sleep with these girls, but I felt like I had to.
How come none of these personalities are ever doing anything benevolent? So I think that there could be a spiritual, maybe potential demonic component that's in there that we haven't explored.
The fact that I was single until I was 40, and I knew I was never going to plan a church being a single guy. I wasn't about to set myself up.
You know, and then I remember one time my financial advisor at the time, she was like, hey, did you know you're spending more than you're making every month? And I was like, oh, for real?
And I'm supposed to, perform. This production assistant's like, hey, here's a Viagra. Take it if you want to take it. Don't if you don't. It's in your hand. It's yours.
I teamed up with Moment for the exclusive live premiere of the anticipated Bless God podcast. And the tickets for that are only $7. When you get to the main page, click the yellow Get Ticket button, scroll down to the add-ons and throw in your ticket to the after party as well as some exclusive merchandise. And I will see you there.
Ruslan.
Now, this is where the conversation gets tense. He presses him about the situation in Ohio, about a 10-year-old being a completely devastating situation. He asks him about that, and then he asks him the question. You know the question that mainstream media, non-Christians like to ask Christians and Christian leaders. Okay, here it comes.
It's abuse of a child.
I see it as horrible. I see it as preferable to killing someone else.
So he says, consistent in the fact that, hey, this situation with the 10-year-old, it's horrible what happens to her, but having her carry the child to term is the lesser of two evils versus deleting that child. Okay, so he's very consistent in his pro-life position. And here comes the question.
To the idea of gender as a gift from God. We're committed to the idea that men and women ought to be united with one another in marriage.
Do you still believe that gay people should be converted out of being gay?
I believe that sinners should be converted out of being sinners, and that applies to all of us.
Can somebody be a good Christian, a member of the Southern Baptist Convention, and be gay or lesbian and married to a person of the same sex?
No. And Jesus...
Well, they asked, he answered. Very straightforward question. Under immense stress and pressure on the two most polarizing positions with regards to same-sex community and regards to the unborn, and he did not fold. He was very blunt, he was very direct, and I think oftentimes when we may be in similar situations, we may want to not answer as forthrightly. Maybe we don't want to be as direct as we should be, and I think this was a great example of him being very specific and saying, hey, if someone is participating in this, nope, they can't. But In the same token, he said, I think everyone should be removed from whatever sin that they're dealing with. So anyway, I thought that was a very direct answer. I appreciated his answer, and I think he did a really good job in this interview. This was all over Twitter and that whole thing. And so maybe this is the change that the SBC needs. Maybe this is a breath of fresh air. Maybe this is a good direction. I'm hoping it is, and I'm hoping we get more guys like him who are representatives in the space and are willing to say the hard things and answer the questions directly and honestly and truthfully and all those different things. So shout out to Bart Barber if he sees this video. Hopefully they don't take this video down because 60 Minutes is weird with this kind of stuff, even though this is fair use. If you guys want to hear my original video about this entire SBC debacle, I'll be sure to link that up over here. I will see you over there, all right? Peace.